Today, Airbnb is reacting to the receding COVID threat, but will it work?
And then Netflix had a big wake up call with subscriber loss, and there are cultural issues troubling the world's largest streamer.
And finally, Snap has a new selfie drone. Is it cool or a digital stalker or both?
I'm Laura Fitton, and this is Future Forward.
I am Stephen Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey, Laura.
Hey,
So this week will be fun because we're talking about stuff that both you and I are in the worlds of, uh,
right.
and
You're a
and
movie guy. I've got an Airbnb.
and also I just think you know it's important to remember. Yes, there's complexity in the world, and there are things that are terrible, and all kinds of headlines. But this is not a chasing headlines podcast, and so particularly when we get to the selfie drone, which on one hand may seem very trivial, but I would argue is not, and we'll explain why. Let's jump into Airbnb. So first of all, for our pod listeners who don't know this, you are a Airbnb host.
Right, right. And it's funny, I'm on several platforms, but the easiest way to describe, if I say I have a vacation home, people think I'm wealthy and fancy. So I just say, oh, I run an Airbnb, own and run, right? Um, so it really kind of is the Kleenex of vacation rentals, even though it wasn't the original player, right? VRBO and HomeAway, which have merged, were there long before Airbnb. So it's really been a game changer. It's interesting. Mine is not in a big residential area. There are residents on the island, but there's a big pre-existing cottage rental business already there. In fact, the way the city recognizes our licenses is different for the island homes because that's part of bringing tourists to Portland, Maine. It's very important. So
And
yeah,
how long have you been an Airbnb host? Like how long of a
uh,
journey have you taken with that company?
this will be my fourth year. Actually, right around this time of year, I put my primary residence on the platform so I could learn how it worked, right? For just like a weekend here or there when I wasn't going to be home. And closed on that house in June 2018.
So I guess the thing so I have a confession to make, which is that I have never done Airbnb.
You've never even
Um,
stayed in one?
um, Family members have rented them, and I've been guests at family events, but I have never, I just never done it,
Hmm.
and have had some trepidation about it. Um, I'm a hotel person. I
That's
like the
interesting.
I like the formality of the check-in and the room and the privacy. I don't know. And I guess I worried that it would either be too distant, like, hey, there's nobody here to support the property, or too close, like, oh, I live right next door and I'm going to come by and have tea with you and let's play checkers.
Well,
Um,
and I've used Airbnb forever, long, long, long before I ever considered becoming a host. And it did kind of start as like literally, I mean, they were like put an airbed in your extra room. But it very quickly became this other thing. For me, I love kitchens, right? I love dining out, but I want to splurge on an amazing meal. I don't want to have to pay $50 to $100 for every single breakfast, lunch, and dinner when I'm away with my family. So for me, I love getting a house, right? That's just fantastic for me. It makes my vacation much more affordable. And yeah, it's pretty long gone unless you're renting a room in someone's house. The days of actually meeting your host are very much in the past. And for COVID, I really don't trust hotels because of air circulation. I've
hmm.
always found hotels kind of exhausting. So I think it's just a personality difference with you and I.
Well, no, but also, like, if you think about it, right? So Uber in its early days was like, oh, the driver sit up front, talk to the driver. But what do you do? It was all this kind of like, and that's all gone. Like now
I
it's
mean,
like,
Lyft was like that. Uber was originally black cars, so it was originally just super expensive. And,
right.
I didn't get that either. I was like, I'm not going to take black cars for normal rides around the city. Ryan Graves put me in one once. I was like, this is great, but I'll probably never do this again because I just don't spend this way.
But I also, so tell me, what kind of Airbnb host are you? Like, do you leave mints on the pillow? Or are you like,
No, we have a it is basically an oceanfront home. It's a little distant back and up from the coast because I'm a climate person. But it's got ocean views from every room. It's cozy, but we've put in lots of beds so that, a couple families could come and sleep up to 12, but it's only 1,400 square feet. I feel like I'm giving an ad here. And
That's
I'm
all right.
actually shocked how many big groups of adults come in. I'm like, two of you are going to be on ottoman foldouts. Like we really had, two, three couples and their kids in mind when we set up the bedding for it. And, it's 2 hours away. So I'm not there. They self check in. I have a wonderful cleaner, and the island's a very tight knit community in case something, I have a few friends up there in case something needs to be run over and checked on. And I go up there a lot myself. I stay there when it's not rented as often as I can.
So this part of what brought Airbnb to the front of this pod this week is this decision they've made that their employees can fully be remote, live and work anywhere, and it will have no impact on their compensation. Which I thought, given the get people back to work drumbeat that I keep hearing from all over town, I thought was pretty interesting. Like, is that management is it eating their own dog food essentially?
I mean, it might be. I mean, it seems to be working for them, or they wouldn't be doing it in terms of like corporate strategy and how management has been for the last 2.5 years, right? Or 2 years. But it also, they wouldn't do it if it wasn't working for them. I'll stick to that for now. But I mean, I guess there is a much bigger picture where there are a lot of work from home customers on Airbnb. And it is very good for their business that people can work from anywhere and rent a place on the coast for a month and just work from there. In fact, I got a lot of those inquiries during the pandemic.
Yeah, we have a bunch of friends who literally sold their apartment or stopped renting their apartment and now just live complete nomadic lifestyle and like it very much.
Yeah. It's actually a piece of I'm a single mom, right? And my kids are about to both be in college. And it's part of my pay for college strategy, actually, that I will attempt once they're all done high school. So it'll be sort of towards the end of college to live 10 months a year in my vacation rental and 2 months a year in what is now my primary residence, and then just rent both the rest of the time. Now, the 10 months renting this house, I'll probably just look for a college that has families that come in for the year and work there and don't want to like move to Boston. But I'll certainly keep Airbnb being the main property in the summer. And that way both mortgages will be covered and free up some energy for all those tuition payments. Yay.
So, part of what I find interesting is just all these things have changed really quickly. Certainly, COVID changed a lot of people's work-life balance questions. Was there, like, when it was clear that COVID was arriving, was there a moment where you thought, oh my, like there's got to be pressure? If I'm asking personal questions, you can stop me. But
no, the sky was completely falling. If what you're getting towards was the sky falling, the sky was falling. I got right on the phone with my lender. And I said, it's a tough time of year anyway, right? Because it's a very summer intensive rental. I do get some spring weekends. I not as many as my fall weekends. Fall weekends always completely sell out. Spring weekends are a little slower. So I was already kind of like right on that edge of like, am I going to make, March and April mortgage payments okay? And so I got right on the phone with the bank, talked it through with them, went on to forbearance. I had to send, basically $20,000 back to people. Obviously, I didn't have their money yet, but these things all just got canceled and gutted. And then the state of Maine outlawed all rentals until July. Actually, they outlawed it without an end date. And then that stayed in place till July. And realistically, people didn't really start coming out again till August. So it was terrifying. I was like, well, I'm going to have to sell this house, I guess. It's a lucky problem to have. It's not as bad as, oh, I won't have a home. And we just white knuckled it and rode it out. We didn't even go up there for maintenance. We didn't go up ourselves out of respect to our island neighbors who are like, which was ironic because we are very, very, very strict in terms of our self-quarantining. So it would have been very safe for me to go to the island in terms of my effect on other islanders. But everybody had this fear of, traveling and people from away. And we respected that. We want to be good neighbors. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's domain outlawed rentals. I did not know that. That's
I
fascinating.
got an email. Well, yeah, yes, I think it was statewide, but I first heard about it because I got an email from the city of Portland saying, you used to hold a real estate, vacation rental license from us. I'm like, oh, I used to. Okay. You're getting this email because you used to have a license. Those are suspended until further notice.
You know, I don't know whether in 10 years we will look back and remember this 2.5 year, 3 year moment with this granularity, or whether or not we're all just going to have some collective hypnosis and just forget it. But like,
I mean, we
I mean,
already have that. I feel like people think it's over and levels are just as high as they were during the initial surge.
yeah, but it appears that whatever this version of the of the pandemic is not as deadly. I mean, that's Nancy Pelosi had COVID 2 weeks ago, and now she's in Ukraine.
Which she
So
obviously got Paxlovid, right? I mean, yes, we have a treatment that's good. We have a couple other antivirals, but they're very, very hard for the ordinary person to get. And they have to get them within 5 days. You have to,
yep.
have a doctor in the first place, which you maybe don't. And to some extent, we're 2 years into this deadly epidemic. A lot of the people it would have killed, like I don't know how to say this without sounding absolutely dark, but when you're making bread, right, and you put the yeast in, once the yeast it's all the sugar, it stops reproducing as much, right? So the
Ugh.
people for whom this is super deadly, that is a smaller population now. There are still plenty of people, but it is a smaller population. And I don't know. It's still I'm still wearing masks.
So Airbnb has announced that as of May 31st, it will no longer offer COVID-19 related refunds. What does that mean exactly?
It's a good question because they've already made announcements like this in the past, right? In the very beginning, they had the most radical COVID refunds policy. It was very much abused by guests. They had this story they were telling the world that hosts, don't worry, hosts are getting 25% of what they would have gotten, but it was we were getting for like an $8,000 rental, you were lucky to get a couple $100s, right? Because they were like, well, if it canceled, then you only would have gotten half, and then we're giving you 25% of that half. And then they started going through reservation by reservation and trying to claim some reservations didn't qualify, which was absurd in the beginning. Like later in the cycle, when reservations were made well after the pandemic, I can understand those not qualifying. But like I had a family that was supposed to come from England for a huge rental, had to cancel, and I got nothing out of that fund. So I think out of the 20,000 I lost, which was, between the two platforms, I think Airbnb sent me maybe $1,000.
All right. So the last thing I want Airbnb is this interesting headline from Deadline. It says Queer Eye producers Scout and Bloomberg team on docuseries about Airbnb's secretive safety team.
Yeah. So did you see the article they reference, the one in Bloomberg a year or two ago
No.
about safety? I mean, it's right. We are lay people. We are not trained in hospitality. We're not trained in safety. There are some sketchy people on the host side, and there are sketchy people on the guest side. It is very murky. I'm on a lot of hosting groups on Facebook, and you see people all the time who are like, all my listings were just shut down. I cannot appeal. I cannot get anybody on the phone. I don't know what's going on. And sometimes maybe the host was a jerk, but often it's the guest has claimed they saw a camera somewhere inside the house or somewhere that's not allowed. And there's just this no questions asked, shut it all down and then go figure it out. So that was always frustrating to me as a host and kind of scary. But then you read this article and like, yeah, some really horrible things have happened. As Chris Sackett said when he turned it down as an angel investment, like people will be raped, people will die. it would be interesting if they did a similar series on hotels, because I suspect it's not a whole lot different, hotel versus Airbnb. But obviously, there's a bit more security in place at a hotel.
So this is interesting. There is no doubt that there are sketchy people on both sides. The one thing I will tell you, and I've heard this from Uber drivers as well, is, so here's the way that someone explained it to me. You've got this sheet of numbers in front of you, and they all have complaint number. This person's gotten 5 complaints, this person's gotten 50, whatever, and you have to decide who to cancel,
Right.
and very quickly it becomes a math problem. So if the complaint was of a certain seriousness and the complainant doesn't have any marks against them, the math is shut it down. And it's not, and it's interesting when there's no recourse, right? I mean, from the business standpoint of Uber or Airbnb or any of these big gig economy employers, it's like, I mean, their position is, look, we don't owe you a job. Just go work for somebody else. Well, if your entire livelihood is driving an Uber, or you've got a mortgage on a house that is counting on being paid for by guests, like the personal impact of being shut down by algorithmically, if you will, is terrifying.
Well, and what happens to the people whose vacations were booked? Their vacations get canceled when it's handled that way. So it's a tough problem to solve. I don't envy them having to do that. But they do seem to skew towards the guests. There are a lot of pretty bad behaving guests that get to stay on the platform. Human nature, I guess. You need the vibe.
So when is this documentary coming out? It sounds like Scout Productions have teamed up to produce a series which is based on the Bloomberg article.
You'll know more about how long that kind of thing takes to produce than I do.
Yeah, shorter than it used to, that's for sure.
But I bet there are some amazing stories to be told. And when I won't say who, but when I read that article, a name popped up. I'm like, why does that look familiar? And I looked at my past guest list, and one of the Airbnb employees had actually stayed with me. I'm like, I'm glad I didn't know that beforehand. I would have been much more nervous. Like, for whatever it's worth, they loved the place. So
I have to tell you, like, when it comes to, for example, I have not watched the WeWork documentary.
Oh, right.
I haven't watched it. I watched one of the 2 Fry Festival document. Like to some extent, I wonder if you're Netflix, and we're going to get to Netflix in a minute. I mean, it seems like that's pretty inside baseball stuff. I wonder if people really care about that. I mean, I wonder what the data says.
Oh, I mean, that article was about like a really drastic and terrible rape that happened in New York City, where the key was being handed out through a bodega. So it was very easy for somebody to get that key and make a copy and just go into the property and rape the guest. So I think there's probably no shortage of it won't feel like inside baseball, right? It'll probably be a very dramatic series. I don't know.
So it's more about the case that is.
We got to talk about Coastal Grandmother. This trended on Twitter a couple days ago, and it's this vibe of like, white linens. It's really kind of the vibe of wealth in a way, but a very young TikToker has sort of raised all these like Diane Keaton characters and Grace and Frankie and stuff to the level of the hot trend for summer. And I was laughing so hard because I'm like, oh, Coastal Grandma, what, me? I have this selfie in my profile picture of, I'm at the Airbnb. You can see the ocean behind me. So shout out to all the Coastal Grandmothers. Come be one in Portland, Maine with us this summer.
That's very funny. All right, let's get to Netflix, because I want to make sure we have time for Netflix. So Netflix is going through
a lot.
They're
going through some things.
And my first reaction to Netflix losing subscribers is kind of like, duh. I mean, if you're a Netflix subscriber 5 years ago or 3 years ago, and you're paying $11 a month, and now Disney and Paramount,
yeah,
right, and all these other guys have shown up, and they all have a hit show that you want. At some point, you say, I mean, back in the HBO days, which is now HBO days again. I mean, the big thing that these, then not a streamer at that point, but subscription cable channels fear is churn. which is if you don't have a show you have to watch. And while the other channels, the other streamers have, like it or not, gone to this once a week release an episode back to the way television worked, Netflix has pretty much stuck to their guns and they release everything, you know, at one time, which means it's easy to sit down, spend a week,
Watch it.
watch,
Yeah.
watch the hit show with all the episodes, and then be like, okay, what now? What? So I guess I didn't find the number drop surprising, and I've never understood why they didn't turn on IP based password, testing like yesterday or
To cut
5
down
years.
on password sharing.
Yeah, I mean there's nothing hard about that tech, right?
Yeah, I feel like Apple has always done a version of that with your own iTunes music, right? Which is your music that you already bought, right? They just limit how many devices you can authorize because there are some valid arguments against those crackdown tools. Like, for example, would I be able to watch my Netflix account at my house when I'm up at the Airbnb, right? That's an important use case for those of us who are ridiculously lucky, right? That said, yeah, it's it's wild. And all you need is like a two-factor authentication, right? Like I think I had my ex's HBO Max account for quite a while until one day I logged in and it was like, okay, what did we just text you? I'm like, oh, you just texted him? Great. Okay. No more. I'm done.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No,
you
I
know,
mean,
they've got to compete again, right? They changed. It's funny. They flipped the table for the old, CD rental or DVD rental business model. And then they pivoted to streaming. And now there's so many options with streaming. And they're the ones who piloted, come up with great original content to be sticky and make people stay. But now that that's been reproduced and the average person is like, wait, I've got 7 streaming services. It's my cable bill once again. So much for cutting the cord. The industry is going to have to figure out a solution to that.
yeah, and so I'm in a situation where I have cable for local news and some other things. Originally, we had an antenna and we recorded on, TiVo back in the day, and then TiVo kind of fell over and got expensive and silly, and the antenna didn't work as well, so we went to cable, and now we have cable and a bunch of streaming services. And the bottom line is, not a bargain, not a bargain.
No, it's a lot of money.
So there was a lot of coverage of Netflix that I think is worth talking about. One is the stock imploding, but then the other is this question about kind of what's going on inside the place. And
Well, and just what happened to everybody who'd been, they had this Tadum thing they were going to do, and they recruited a lot of people and a lot of diverse people, and summarily laid them off with 2 weeks severance. And so you had some really angry voices on Twitter this week saying, like, I would have had incredible severance at the job I'd been in for 7 years. You recruited me away from it, and now you've just dumped me. Not a good look.
What do you make of that? Like, what do you think happened?
I don't know because I don't know what that business unit was or the economics of it. I just know I saw a lot of really stressed out people. I also saw some pushback against the stressed out people saying, these were incredible jobs with really high salary and, I don't know, you should be lucky you got fired. I have not had the chance to double click through and really look into it. This was a busy week for me. What do you think?
I think I don't know is the answer. I don't know that story. I know that if you're projecting out, so Netflix has to push a lot of buttons at the same time. The idea of going to a lower priced ad supported model hurts my heart. I had a thing I had to watch this weekend on Tubi, and I haven't been forced to sit through commercials in a really long time, and it just made my head hurt.
It's hard. I watched live TV at one point last year, and I was like, "What is going on? This is terrible."
Yeah. So Netflix needs to do 4 things well in order to be this next chapter, right? They need to get talent to show up. They still are the most generous payer, but with no back end, meaning that, the people that bring projects to them get paid a premium number, but don't get any residuals, don't get any. So you got agents in Hollywood increasingly, playing the field more and saying, Netflix is great, as is HBO, as is Paramount Plus, as is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so they don't have a green field of opportunity in terms of talent. That's thing number one. Thing number two is, just to be clear, they have a spectacular global footprint as a business. Netflix changed the way I consume television. I watch detective series from Denmark. I watch shows from Australia. I watch things that are dubbed. The dubbing is okay. I don't care. I watch things that have I watch things that have captions. I never used to watch shows with captions. So, so they have a great big world footprint, which is not easy to do. Just the logistics of, we bought a series that was originally, in Spanish, and we need to now dub it and record it and get talent and get actors to voice talent and create multiple and have it ready for release on a world platform with multiple levels of captions. And this is not stuff you push a button. It's not the same thing as AI lower thirds. Those, and even those are sketchy, but
it's not just one body of content. Like, the country by country, what you can and can't get is all different. It's very complicated soup,
right? And here's the thing you don't. So here's my one. If anyone from Netflix is listening, I have one product ask, only one. Once I've watched something, and I've watched it, a checkbox that says only show me things I haven't watched, because
it is weird. They know so much about you, but they keep showing you stuff you've already watched.
Well, I assume
that's how the average viewer views.
No, I think they've tested it, and what they found is the actual amount of new material that fits whatever the target is that they've aimed at me would make it look skimpy. That's all I can figure. But
a lot of people do watch the same thing over and over.
Well, that makes me sad. I watch one time, not a repeat viewer ever, never have been. One time.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. No, we rewatch a little bit, not intensively, but a little bit.
Old episodes. All right. So we're running a little bit late, and I want to have a few minutes to talk about Snap.
Throne on your hands.
So when my son was running track, I had this idea that I wanted to get a drone that could follow him, so that I could see him if he ran long distance.
Sure.
And I wanted to be able to follow him
more than just yay, son.
And I researched it, and it did exist. And they, you had to wear, you had to wear some kind of a little, we never bought it. It seemed, this was years ago. So this is this thing here. Let's actually look at a little bit of video for those of us who are, where's the, I got so many Snap things here. It's quite charming and cute. And the Wall Street Journal has a review of it that's actually very helpful. I'll just play it.
Also, while you're queuing that up, it's so funny for people of a certain generation to know that Snap not only still exists, but is actually quite huge as a
and
parent.
Profitable.
I'm well aware, but if I wasn't a parent of teens, I would have thought they kind of fell off the planet when those glasses didn't work out.
It's interesting to me that they continue to experiment. So, all right. So here's why I recommend you pay attention to Pixie. First of all, it's the first of a generation of devices, so it's going to get better. The battery life is going to get longer. It seems really easy to use, and I can imagine. I mean, I will check with my focus group / younger children and ask them this question, but it seems to me that the idea that you could take this little pocket-sized device and go with your friends out somewhere and pop it up in the air and be broadcasting, or I guess recording. I guess it's not
It's a robotic
broadcasting.
selfie stick.
It's a robotic selfie stick. But hard to not imagine that in a year or two you'll be walking down the street in New York and someone will be walking next to you and they will have a drone floating behind them or in front of them, broadcasting live on, Facebook or wherever, and we will, kind of, it does seem a little bit like reality TV gone wild, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a
What's the
robot.
range?
I don't know. I do not know. I mean, it's not expensive. It's $230. I should probably, being the tech geek that I am, buy one.
Sure.
Just so that I can fly it a little bit around the house.
But a lot of the big privacy questions are going to come down to, how far can this go? What's the range? How much can it record? Because
it has no audio.
This could be a super creepy stalker thing. Oh, no audio. That's interesting.
No
so
audio.
They won't be walking down the street broadcasting.
Yet.
True. That'll obviously come.
I mean, I think it's very Jetsons, and inevitably the beginning of a trend. Now the question is, who will, who's the likely competitor? Is it Apple? No, I don't think so. Is it DJI? Possibly. But I do think that personal selfie stick stalker cam is in our not very distant future. And with that, ding, ding, ding.
With that, have a great week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Take care.